I got put in my place at my own sister's engagement party. At least, that's what she thought she was doing. The backyard was glowing. String lights, candles, soft music, people laughing into their wine glasses. My sister's voice floated over all of it, bright and practiced, when she said it. "This is my sister, Verity. She works at the courthouse. Just admin stuff, phones, files, that kind of thing." There was a polite ripple of laughter. Someone tapped a fork against their glass. My cheeks burned, but I did what I'd always done in my family. I smiled. I stayed quiet. I became smaller. Then her fiancé turned toward me. Really looked at me. His brow furrowed like he was trying to place a song he'd heard before. "So, what do you actually do there?" he asked. I didn't launch into a speech. I didn't defend myself. I answered with one word. And that one word didn't cause a scene or flip a table. It did something worse. It changed the way my family saw me, and themselves forever. My name is Verity. And my family? They love labels. Not deep descriptions. Not real curiosity. Neat, simple tags you can throw into a conversation and move on from. My sister Evelyn was the impressive one. The star. The born leader. The one you introduce with a list of accomplishments and stories that end with, "Can you believe she's ours?" Me? I was the one who works at the courthouse. That phrase became my entire personality at family gatherings. Thanksgiving, birthdays, Easter brunch, random Sunday dinners. Didn't matter. Some aunt or cousin would smile kindly and ask, "So, still doing admin at the courthouse?" Like they were checking in on a childhood hobby. I'd nod. Yeah. Still there. And just like that, their obligation to care about my life was fulfilled. On to Evelyn's latest promotion, her new clients, her vacation plans. They had no idea how carefully I'd trained myself to disappear around them. Not because I hated my work. Not because I was ashamed. Because every time I tried, really tried, to explain what I did, to talk about cases and responsibility and the pressure that came with my job, their eyes glazed over. Or worse, they got this faintly uncomfortable look, like I was bragging, like my success was somehow rude. Especially Evelyn. She liked me small. Harmless. Background. So I learned to round off my edges. I let courthouse admins sit there unchallenged because it kept things peaceful. It kept her center stage. It kept my parents relaxed and proud of the daughter they understood. At home, the pattern never changed. We'd sit around the table, plates full, wine poured. Evelyn would start talking. About work, about people who knew people, about deals and deadlines, and the whole room tilted toward her. My parents leaned in. They asked follow-up questions. They glowed. When I spoke, it was like someone turned the volume down. Forks scraped plates. Bread baskets got passed. Someone remembered they needed more water. It wasn't open cruelty. It was muscle memory. Automatic. There was exactly one person who ever seemed to see through it. My cousin Lily. She'd notice when my phone buzzed late at night and I stepped outside to take a call. She saw how tired I looked some mornings, how I carried myself, how I measured my words. She watched my family breeze past my answers and would reach over under the table, give my hand a quick squeeze. It was her way of saying, "I see you." Even if they don't. I used to tell myself I didn't care what my family thought. That their opinions didn't matter. That I didn't need their approval because I had my own life, my own career, my own identity far away from the way they described me in 3 lazy words. That was only half true. Because every single time Evelyn laughed about my little courthouse job, something inside me twisted. Not fiery anger. Not yet. Something heavier. A quiet, tired ache. By the time her engagement party rolled around, I already knew my role by heart. Show up early. Help set up. Smile in the background of a few pictures. Be so helpful. Be so sweet. Leave before anyone noticed I hadn't really been part of anything. I didn't go expecting respect. I didn't go expecting anyone to ask who I really was. What I didn't expect was a single question that would make it impossible to keep pretending. The party was peak Evelyn. Perfectly curated. The kind of outdoor setup you see in magazine spreads or sponsored posts. String lights strung like a fake sunset across the yard. White flowers draped over every surface. A custom banner with Evelyn and Daniel arcing over the patio like a blessing. I arrived early as usual. I hadn't even set my purse down before my mom pressed a stack of napkins into my hands and pointed at the drink station. "Can you take care of over there?" she said, already turning away. "No hello. No thank you. No question mark." I slipped into my usual invisible uniform. By the time the first guests wandered in, I'd refilled the ice several times, rearranged glasses, and wiped down a spotless counter just to keep busy. I told myself it was fine. This is what I did. I helped. I stayed out of the way. Then Evelyn arrived. She stepped out of the car like she knew every eye would be on her. Dressed perfect, makeup soft and glowy, diamond ring catching every bit of light. People flocked to her instinctively. Compliments flew across the yard. Phones came out for photos. Laughter bubbled up around her like carbonation. Her fiancé, Daniel, walked just behind her. Dark suit, relaxed smile, that quiet confidence of someone used to boardrooms and important meetings. He shook hands. He remembered names. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. At first, he barely glanced in my direction. He was busy being introduced to everyone my parents wanted to impress. Evelyn made sure they all knew his resume. Big firm. Big clients. Big deals. Numbers that sounded important. Titles people nodded at, even if they didn't fully understand them. My parents beamed like they'd personally drafted his LinkedIn. I found my usual spot near the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a row of lanterns, champagne still untouched in my hand. The script played out like always, right down to the predictable punchlines. Then Evelyn's eyes landed on me. "Oh," she said suddenly, fake surprise too bright in her voice. "Come here." She hooked her arm around my shoulder the way you'd casually grab a serving spoon. "I don't think everyone's met my sister," she said. "This is Verity. She works at the courthouse." A few heads turned. A few polite nods. Mild interest. "She's just admin," Evelyn added with a laugh. "Keeps everything organized. Answers the phones. You know how it is." That did it. A few chuckles. A knowing smile or two. The kind people give when they think they've placed you on their internal social ladder. Heat crept up my neck. I stared into the fizz of my champagne so I wouldn't have to see their faces. This was nothing new. It was just louder than usual. More public. My throat tightened, but I swallowed my first instinct to correct her and did what I always did. I let it go. But Daniel didn't laugh. He was watching me now. Not in a creepy way. In a curious way. Like something wasn't lining up. His smile had slipped. His eyes narrowed just the tiniest. I took the end seat, the unofficial designated spot for people who aren't required to be part of the main event. From there, you can help pass dishes, pour water, and quietly make sure everything runs smoothly without anyone actually paying attention to you. The toast started. My dad said a few emotional, slightly awkward words about watching his little girl grow up. Evelyn's best friend told an embarrassing story from college. People laughed. Glasses clinked. Evelyn soaked it all in, eyes shining, like the entire evening had been scripted just for her. Then she stood again, tapping her glass, grinning. "I just want to say how proud I am," she said, resting a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Some people get to argue huge, important cases for a living," she nodded at him, "and some people." Her gaze slid down the table to me. "Answer the phones," she finished, smiling too sweetly. "Right, Verity?" A few strained laughs. A few uncomfortable shuffles. More people glanced at me this time. Her eyes gleamed, daring me to contradict her. My heart pounded in my ears. That old, familiar reflex kicked in, to smooth it over, to make a joke, to take the hit so no one else had to feel awkward. And then Daniel turned his whole body toward me in his chair. "Wait," he said slowly, cutting through the soft chatter. "Sorry, I've been wondering this all night. What do you actually do at the courthouse, Verity?" The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people listening to a toast. The cold, sudden quiet of a dropped plate. Every face slowly angled in my direction, and just like that, the fiction I'd been feeding them for years had nowhere left to hide. For a beat, I did nothing. I stared down at my hands resting on the tablecloth. Watched my thumb trace the condensation ring my glass had left. Felt the grain of the wood beneath the cloth. Heard the distant clatter of pans from the kitchen and the soft buzz of the string lights overhead. In that pause, a flood of tiny memories crashed over me. Every holiday where I'd been the first one there and the last one cleaning up. Every dinner where my job was reduced to admin stuff and no one thought to ask for more detail. The early mornings when I'd walked into the courthouse with a knot in my stomach, knowing the decisions I'd make that day would alter people's lives. The nights I'd come home, shoes still on, jacket half off, and sat at my table rereading documents for the next morning's hearing while my phone lit up with, "Are you coming to brunch?" messages I didn't answer. The few times, right at the beginning, when I'd tried to share a win and watched my parents' expressions tighten with something between confusion and discomfort. I'd convinced myself that keeping quiet about who I was and what I'd achieved was a kindness, a way of not making waves. A way of not threatening Evelyn's position as the golden child. But sitting there, with every pair of eyes on me and Daniel's simple question hanging between us, I realized the truth. I hadn't been protecting them. I'd been protecting a version of me they preferred. The smaller one. The manageable one. The one that didn't require them to update their narrative. Across from me, Evelyn's smile had frozen. It was too wide. Too stiff. Her jaw was tight. She sensed something was off, even if she didn't know what yet. My mother stared at her plate like it might give her a script. My father's hand hovered near his wine glass, unsure whether to pick it up or not. Daniel just waited. Not impatient. Not mocking. Just present. The old habit whispered at me. Make a joke, soften it, say something vague about supporting the court and change the subject. But underneath the fear, under years of practiced smallness, a different feeling rose up. Calm. Clear. Solid. If I told the truth now, it would land. If I dodged it, I'd be choosing once again to disappear because it kept everyone else comfortable. So I set my glass down. The soft clink sounded strangely loud. I straightened in my chair. I let my shoulders settle back where they belonged instead of hunching. I met Daniel's eyes. Then my parents'. Then finally Evelyn's. When I spoke, my voice didn't shake. "I'm a judge," I said. One word. No explanation. No apology. It didn't explode like a bomb. It just dropped. The effect was immediate, but quiet, like someone had hit mute on the whole evening. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A fork hovered midway between plate and mouth. Even the music seemed distant. My mother's face went paper white in seconds. Her lips parted, closed, parted again. My father blinked once. Twice. He set his glass down very carefully, as though his hands weren't entirely trustworthy. Evelyn laughed. It came out high and brittle. "Okay," she said with a little wave of her hand. "Sure." Hilarious. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Daniel. He hadn't moved. But something had shifted in his expression. The vague curiosity was gone. In its place was sharp, focused recognition. "Judge," he repeated, very softly. He said it like he was tasting the word, matching it with a memory. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Verity Cole?" he asked. "Downtown courthouse?" The silence somehow deepened. I heard my own pulse in my ears. "Yes," I said. He exhaled slowly, a sound halfway between a laugh and disbelief. "You presided over my case last year," he said. "The corporate dispute with the partners' fallout. I stood in front of you 3 separate times." He turned to the table, then back to me. "You were firm. Direct. You didn't let anyone perform. You listened. That's why I remembered you." Across from him, Evelyn's forehead creased. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, talking over him. "She works admin. She answers phones. You've met her at family stuff twice." Daniel finally looked at her. "I know what an admin assistant does," he said calmly. "And I know what a judge does. Trust me, I've been on the receiving end of enough of them." His gaze returned to me. "I had no idea you were related," he said quietly. "You never told me your sister's last name. You just said she worked at the courthouse." My father finally found his voice. "You're a judge?" he asked like he was testing out a foreign word. "Since when?" 3 years, I replied. My mother shook her head desperately, as if she could rattle a different reality into place. But you said you were assisting someone, she insisted. That you were helping. At the beginning, I said. During my clerkship. I told you when I was appointed. You changed the subject. No one ever asked again. I watched it land. Not as one dramatic realization, but as a slow, creeping awareness around the table. The knowledge that this wasn't a lie I'd told them. It was a truth they'd chosen not to hear. Evelyn shoved her chair back an inch, the legs scraping loudly against the stone patio. This is insane, she said, voice climbing. You let everyone think you were doing admin. Who does that? I met her eyes for the first time all night. I didn't let anyone do anything, I said evenly. I stopped correcting you. Her face flushed deep red, anger and something like fear twisting together. You did this on purpose, she burst out. You waited until my engagement party to drop this. You wanted to humiliate me. I shook my head. You humiliated yourself, I said quietly. You made a joke out of me in front of your fiancé and our whole family. I answered a question he asked. She swung toward Daniel like she needed backup. You knew, she demanded. You knew and didn't tell me? He held her gaze, then slowly shook his head. I honestly didn't connect Judge Cole with your sister, he said. You never said her last name. And you never really let her talk. That hit harder than anything I could have said. The words hung there, ugly and true. Around the table, reactions rolled outward. My uncle suddenly became fascinated by his napkin. A cousin coughed into their drink. At the far end, my grandmother reached across the table with a thin, steady hand and closed her fingers around my wrist. I always wondered, she murmured. You carry yourself like someone who makes decisions. Evelyn pushed her chair back hard and stood up. The screech of wood against stone made people jump. This is my night, she said, voice shaking now. And you have completely ruined it. You always do this, Verity. You always find a way to make things about you. I stayed seated. I've barely said a word all night, I answered. Until you reduced me to a punchline. That was your choice, not mine. Her mouth opened and closed. For the first time in our lives, no comeback arrived on cue. Daniel rose more slowly. Evelyn, he began carefully, the way you spoke to her. Don't, she snapped, turning on him. You're supposed to be on my side. He hesitated, then drew in a breath. I'm on the side of the truth, he said. And I can't believe I never noticed how you talk about your own sister. How all of you talk about her. The words landed like a soft, brutal hammer. No yelling. No theatrics. Just a simple shift of weight from one side of the scale to the other. For the first time, the center of gravity at that table wasn't tilted toward Evelyn. She seemed to realize it too. Her eyes darted from face to face, looking for the familiar reflection of her own importance. She didn't find it. No one rushed to defend her. My parents sat frozen. The relatives closest to her looked down. Even my mother, who'd always swooped in to smooth things over, stayed silent. This is unbelievable, Evelyn whispered. You think you're better than me now? I shook my head. No, I said. I just stopped pretending to be less. For a heartbeat, something raw flickered across her face. Not anger. Not just anger. Fear. A glimpse of the girl underneath all the performance. Then she slapped her napkin down on the table and turned on her heel. Her heels hit the tile in sharp, angry beats as she stalked inside, the sound fading into the house. Daniel stood there for a moment, jaw tight, then looked at me. There was a lot in his eyes. Guilt, respect, confusion. I need to talk to her, he said quietly. I nodded. You should. He followed Evelyn inside. Conversations started up again in nervous little fits and starts, then died. No one felt much like laughing anymore. We sat there for a long, strange moment. Plates half full. Glasses sweating onto the linens. Then my mother reached for my hand. Her fingers trembled. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't yank my hand away. I didn't soften it for her. Every time I tried to be seen, I said, you looked away. No one argued with that. We picked at dessert in a quiet that had nothing to do with music or speeches. It was the silence of people realizing the story they've been telling themselves doesn't match reality. Later, when I finally slipped out and walked to my car, I felt lighter. Not triumphant. Just relieved. Like I'd been holding something heavy for years without realizing how much it hurt, and I'd finally set it down. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment to sunshine and an unfamiliar calm. Usually after a family event, my brain would be replaying every conversation, every slight, every moment I'd stayed quiet and hated myself for it. That day my mind was still. For a while. Then my phone started buzzing. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts from relatives who hadn't bothered to check in on me in years, suddenly asking how I'd been all this time. Long paragraphs from people trying to apologize without fully admitting what they were apologizing for. My parents had left 2 voicemails. I could see the timestamps. I didn't listen to them. Not yet. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing in the hall. He looked like he'd run a marathon in his head overnight. Shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, expression carefully neutral. I let him in. We sat on opposite ends of my small couch, 2 mugs of coffee cooling untouched on the table between us. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to defend the way things had been. "I can't pretend I didn't see it," he said finally. "The way she talked to you. The way everyone else let her." I nodded. There wasn't much to add. "I really didn't know you were you," he said, a faint, self-conscious smile tugging at his mouth. "If that makes any sense. But now that I do, I don't know what that means for us. For me and Evelyn." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I love her," he admitted. "But I also saw something last night I can't unsee. And I don't know if I can build a life with someone who needs to step on you to feel tall." He didn't ask for advice. He didn't treat me like a prop in his story. He just told the truth. When he left, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt honest. A few days later, there was another knock at my door. This time it was Evelyn. No designer dress. No carefully styled hair. No ring thrust forward for admiration. Her hair was scraped back in a messy knot. Her eyes were puffy. She looked smaller somehow. We stood there for a second. No dramatic music. No hug. No screaming. "I was scared," she said eventually, staring at a spot above my head. "Of being ordinary. Of being second best. Of disappearing next to you." The admission landed between us, jagged and strange. "I'm not here to compete with you," I said quietly. "I never was." She let out a breath, like she'd been holding it for years. "I know that now," she said. "I just didn't want to see it before." We didn't magically become close that day. She didn't suddenly transform into a perfectly self-aware and supportive sister. But something real shifted. My parents started asking questions, not just about work, but about how I felt, what my days actually looked like. And for the first time, they listened past the first sentence. At dinners, Lily would catch my eye and smile, this proud secret little smile that said, "There you are." And for once, I didn't feel the need to minimize, to joke, to change the subject. I used to think staying quiet was the same thing as being kind. That biting my tongue and downplaying myself was noble. That making myself small so other people could feel big was generous. I was wrong. Silence didn't protect anyone. It just taught the people around me how little they could get away with giving back. How far they could shrink me and I'd still contort myself to fit. The truth is, you don't owe anyone a watered-down version of yourself just because they're more comfortable with you that way. You don't have to hide your growth to keep someone else from feeling insecure. You don't have to play dumb to keep the peace at dinner. You don't have to stay the quiet one if your voice has something to say. If any of this feels familiar, if you've ever sat at a table listening to people describe a version of you that doesn't match who you really are, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments. I promise someone else needs to hear it. And if this hit a nerve, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. You deserve to be seen as who you are, not who someone else finds convenient.